Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Resident Evil 3 Remake. So I already tested the demo that was released for this game. If you want to try out that demo, you can find it on Steam very easily. You can play like 20 minutes of the game. Well, in this video I'm going to be testing the same location, basically, trying to get some explosions with a good amount of enemies on screen. So yeah, here we go. There's DX11 and DX12 available to select. At least for what I tested so far, DX11 is still the one that you should choose if you have either an AMD or NVIDIA GPU. Both of them, when using DX12, use more CPU, more VRAM and more system RAM, so DX11 should be the way to go. It's still a better implementation than on RE2, but DX11 is still better on this one. Then in the options menu, to improve performance, my recommendations is that you lower ambient occlusion. If you lower it from HBAO Plus to SSAO, you get like a 10 FPS boost, so very significant difference there. Then on the anti-aliasing option, you got SMAA, TAA and TAA plus FXAA. If you turn it off completely, you'll have a few extra frames. Using TAA will make the game look much softer, but the jaggies are less obvious, especially when you see characters with hair. Then the screen space reflections are a significant performance hit. You can disable them for a big boost, but the game will look worse in general. The reflections are not as accurate. Then the volumetric lighting option, like on Resident Evil 2 Remake, it can be a significant performance difference using medium instead of high, but it's some very specific places, like when you just start the game, there's some light shining through some windows. There it made a huge difference, but then in most locations this effect doesn't seem to be in use as much as in the previous game. So my rule of thumb on this one is to keep volumetric lighting on medium, and the visual difference is very small. And finally the shadow option, lower it from high to low can help. Yeah, the shadows will look worse, but there should be a small improvement, even better if you have low VRAM, since this option also uses less VRAM. Then on the CPU side of things, I tested an i3-9100F, an i5-9400F, so a quad-core CPU and a 6-core CPU, and both of them were fine for 60 frames per second, but just like on Resident Evil 2 Remake, there's stutter every now and then, very noticeable when moving the camera very fast sometimes or getting to a new area. The game will stutter for a few minutes, then stabilize. Not sure if it's DRM related or something else, but it's happening just like on Resident Evil 2 Remake, so your mileage will vary on that one. You might get a lot of stutter, you might not. Some people were reporting different things to me as well, so good luck with that. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be CPU related, since the i3 and the i5 both had those problems, and sometimes they just run the game flawlessly. So it's very hard to say. So yeah, let me know in the comments what your experience was with stutter in this game, so I can start just trying to understand. Then on the system RAM side of things, 8GB of RAM on dual channel should be more than enough to handle this game. If it goes over 8GB, maybe you're using a lot of VRAM. So in that case, lower the textures a little bit and the game will start using less system RAM to compensate the lack of VRAM. Talking about the VRAM, the game uses a lot of it, especially if you put it at the maximum settings. It can be over 8GB, so my recommendation, if you have a 4GB GPU, the high 2GB option on 1080p. If that's a little too much for the VRAM that you have, lower it to high 1GB. The game still looks good, but it uses like 1GB less, at least in my experience. But yeah, on the 570, 1650 Super, 1050 Ti, high 2GB on the texture option was running just fine. And then there's an option I talk about very little on these RE engine games, which is the rendering method. You have two options, one is normal and the other one is interlaced. And if you select interlaced, you get 10 to 15 FPS more, so a significant performance improvement. But the downside of that is that the jaggies will be more obvious. I'll show you a visual comparison at the end of the video, just check the description if you want to skip to that part. But yeah, depending on what distance you are from your monitor, you'll notice it more or less. So if you don't notice a difference, just go ahead and enable it. You get like free 15 FPS, and this will be less noticeable the higher the resolution. So if you're trying to target 4K, for example, you can enable this and get some extra performance, and it will be less obvious than if you enable it on 720p or 1080p. So yeah, I recommend you try it out and see how it goes. And so far what kills performance, at least in my experience with this game, is the big explosions, such as the red barrels that you explode, then volumetric lighting, then sometimes when Nemesis shows up in a cutscene. But those moments are very short, so if you're dropping from 60 to 40 when there's an explosion, once the explosion dissipates, you'll go back to 60, so I don't think it's a big deal. So yeah, I consider those drops quite rare, since you're not always getting those effects on your screen a whole lot of time. But yeah guys, that's about it. I hope you keep enjoying the video, thanks for watching and see you next time!